everyone. Welcome. I'm Deb Baker. I'm the library director here at Manchester Community College, and I'm so glad to see all of you here. I've been involved with One Book, One Manchester for a couple years, and you're going to hear a little bit more about that in a second, but I'm really thrilled to be able to welcome you all here for our author event this year. So I get to do the housekeeping. If you have a phone with you, if you could please silence it, I would appreciate that. And if you decide to take a picture during the talk, if you could just make sure your flash is off, it can be startling for whoever's on the stage. That would be helpful. The restrooms are either around the corner and immediately to your right, or through the door against the wall there and up the stairs. And if for some reason you needed to exit the building altogether, other than the way that you came in, and in case of an emergency, you would just go out and out. I think that's all the, or out. Okay, or behind me. Thank you. I want to thank the Bookery for being here, selling copies of the book. So if you, Manchester's own bookstore, and if you don't have a copy, or if you're shopping for those festive times that are coming up, this book would make a fabulous gift, so you should buy some copies, and Gloria will be signing books at the table just adjacent to where the Bookery is. And also help yourself to some refreshments. I want to thank the MCC English department who provided refreshments tonight. Thank you. And I also wanted to thank all the volunteers and the One Book, One Manchester committee. So if you had something to do with the there were 16 public events and then more events that took place at high schools and colleges around Manchester. If you helped to organize one of those events, could you please stand up so we can all be thankful for you? Thank you. And to our student volunteers, there's only 2 of them here right now, but there was a whole crew of people who came and said, how can we help, and set up all the chairs, and that was really nice. So Selma, thank you for bringing the Honor Society, right? The Humanities Honor Society from Central High School. So that was terrific. Yeah. Thank you, guys. All right. I would also like to respectfully acknowledge that we are gathered this evening on the historical lands of the Abenaki people. And in acknowledging that this land belonged to indigenous people for thousands of years, I hope to spark your awareness and interest and encourage you to learn more about that. And now I would like to introduce the co-chair of One Book, One Manchester and director of our fabulous city library, Denise Van Zanten.
Need to adjust. No fun stuff. So, good evening. It's been an honor to serve along with Deb as co-chair of One Book, One Manchester initiative. As Deb has already acknowledged, we were fortunate to lead a very dedicated and professional team to bring so many programs around Cuckoo Land to the community this year. One Book programs have been happening around the country for many years. They're a way for us to promote literacy and discussion on topics that impact our communities. The program is also an excellent way to bring together many social, educational, cultural, and nonprofit organizations in our communities to host programs, start conversations on topics such as those found in Cuckoo Land. Our efforts this year would not have been successful without the support of our One Book sponsors. Heather Staples Lavoie, Digital Federal Credit Union, New England College, Manchester Community College, Manchester School District, and the Manchester City Library Foundation. Their donations of both funds and in-kind services allowed the committee to purchase copies of the book to give away, promote relevant programs, and to host our guest author tonight. It is now my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Susan Eward, president of Manchester Community College. Her stewardship has created a college that has expanded its academic offerings and oversaw the construction of this beautiful building. She has been supportive of the One Book program and believes in creating a sense of community through reading. She also graciously offered to host our event this evening, which is truly appreciated. Please welcome Dr. Heward.
I'm the commercial before we get to the real program, so I thank you for your patience. First of all, welcome to Manchester Community College. It is your college, and one of the delights for me of coming here was to be able to build this facility, this part of our facility in 2013, because as I say to faculty and staff all of the time, we take our middle name seriously, the community piece. And my dream, which is shared by the faculty and staff here, was to do more and more to bring the community in. I hope if you haven't been here in a while, that you'll take some time and look around and see what our community, you included, have built. Basically, what Manchester needs is what Manchester Community College focuses on doing. So you can find everything here from people who are doing line worker training and hanging off the poles, hopefully not this evening, it's a little brisk, and automotive technology, the kinds of things that you expect from us from when we started in 1945, to things like English majors and math majors, and a nursing program that consistently is in the top 5 in the state, whether we're talking 2-year or 4-year. We have a lot here that you've helped us to build that we're proud of. So kindly wander around, get lost, and have people tell you about what's here. You're most welcome. And bring your friends. For some of you look like you might be pickleball players. We host pickleball in the colder weather, and other events. In all seriousness, please do come back. And it is my absolute pleasure to move us on to the program and to introduce somebody that I just admire so much. I've heard Selma's name from when I first came as the person you needed to know in the community because of the work that she's done with students. So it's my pleasure to introduce the introducer for the evening, Selma Nachas Hoff.
We who are lovers of the humanities can certainly appreciate how the written word can inform us and actually transform us. I think all of us here appreciate books and what they do to our lives. And I would also venture to say that everyone here especially appreciates one book about Manchester. But it's beyond that. I'm supposed to introduce our guest this evening, but I think she needs no introduction. We've all read her book. We understand what is inside of her that she has shared with all of us. The poignancy of her words, the poignancy of her experiences, all that she is, has done, and no doubt will continue to do, is an open book. So it gives me a very great pleasure to introduce our one book, one Manchester author, the inimitable Gloria Norris.
You got to tell me what pickleball is, because I don't know what it is. Does everyone here know what pickleball is? No? She's like, yes. Okay, somebody afterwards come up to me and tell me, explain pickleball. Wow. So, let's see if I can fix this a little bit. Hello, everybody. It's a treat to be here. I'm back in my hometown again. You know, I seem to just keep coming back here. I want to thank Selma for that incredible introduction. And I want to thank the committee members who selected my book, Cuckoo Land, for your one book, one Manchester read this year. I can't tell you what an honor this is for me. I'm very moved and very, very grateful. I want to give a special shout out to a couple of folks. First, Nathan Robbins. I don't know where you are, Nathan. There he is, Mr. Bowtie. He's the business development manager. I called today to find out what your title was, of Barnes & Noble, who moved mountains, I have to say, to make sure that we had enough books available for the events this week. It looked like my publisher was not going to be able to deliver what we needed, and he, just made it happen. So thank you, Nathan, for everything you did. I also want to thank the wonderful folks at the Bookery bookstore for a fantastic event on Sunday. That was just, those guys, they even had cookies baked in the shape of a cover of a book with the word Cuckoo Land. That was really thoughtful, so special. You wouldn't see that back in Cuckoo Land, in LA. Nobody's going to be having, cookies. That's just, it was just beautiful. I also want to give a shout out to the wonderful woman who just introduced me, Selma, the head of the English department at my alma mater, Central High School. Selma, she is like a teacher rock star. That's what I call her. In this town, she has nurtured a love and respect for language and reading in decades of Queen City teenagers. I only wish I could have been one of her students. My writing and my book would no doubt be much improved if I had been. I think we could all use a little grammar refresher course from Selma, couldn't we? I know I could. For years I had a Post-it on my desk that told me what the difference between lie and lay was. And still, I would not want to be tested on that. But that Post-it, it's long gone now, because thank God there's the internet, right? My aging boomer brain probably thinks that 50 times a day, along with, dear God, I wish the internet had never been invented, for a whole host of reasons that we all know. Attacks on our democracy and our civility. Like they say, it's complicated. That's the understatement of the year. But one thing the internet is clearly good for is tracking down people, connecting with people, even people that you've never met or haven't laid eyes on in 50 years. Since Cuckoo Land has come out, a whole bunch of people have come and tracked me down, as you can perhaps imagine. Some total strangers, but also loads and loads of people from my past. It has been phenomenal. Like an episode of that old reality TV show, This Is Your Life, which people of a certain age, my age, would get that reference. I heard from childhood friends at the Elmwood Gardens housing project where I lived for the first 18 years of my life. I heard from my old babysitter. I heard from long-lost Canadian cousins. And I heard from high school pals that I can now confess I smoked pot with back when it was illegal. Oh wait, it's still illegal here, right? I hope the statute of limitations has run out on that and I won't be arrested when I, leave here tonight. That would be unfair. I haven't really smoked pot in decades. Being Jimmy Norris's daughter, illegality was probably a big part of its allure. Because my father was a crook. Most people have read the book and know that. But for you Manch Vegas wild ones who still do smoke pot, I'm sure it will be totally legal here too one of these days. Change can be a little slow coming to the Granite State. kind of like Sisyphus rolling a boulder of that granite up Mount Washington. Unlike in Cuckoo Land, California, my adopted home state, where change is our religion and things move ridiculously fast. We have 40 million people there, and more just keep on coming. There could be 3 new houses on my block by the time I get back there this weekend. And regarding pot, believe it or not, we already have billboards advertising a marijuana home delivery service. It's true. My jaw dropped when I saw that. Cuckoo Land, always on the cutting edge. Like they say, so goes California, so goes the country. So before you know it, that marijuana company will be coming to Manchester, moving into a hipster office in the hipster mill yard. I guarantee it. You know, you guys finally got our Trader Joe's. I bet you're thrilled about that, right? Everybody loves Trader Joe's. I love Trader Joe's. These days, it may be the only thing that everyone in America can agree on. One country, one Trader Joe's. But while I'm pleased that you got the new Trader Joe's, I'm way happier to come back to town and see that so many of the places I remember from my childhood are still here. You still have Bunny's Superette, that little grocery store on Webster with the adorable name. It sounds like a place where Winnie the Pooh would shop. Nobody else has one of those, only Manchester. And of course you have the iconic Puritan, a century old this year, right? Home of the famous chicken tenders, or as some people, including my mother, weirdly used to call them chicken fingers, which didn't make them sound all that appetizing. But really, they're pretty good, they're good. Seems like most people call the place the back room, but I simply refuse to do that. I'm still mired in the past, which is kind of obvious from my book, and so the Puritan, it will remain for me. But definitely one of the biggest landmarks for me personally that I could not believe is still here is the Temple Market, right? Down on Baker Street near Elmwood Gardens. After decades of being shuttered, that place finally reopened. The Temple Market, where I bought the Chuckles candy that rotted my teeth and that I still regret whenever I have to get a crown replaced. The Temple Market, where my mother paid $1/4 a week on layaway for a toy I desperately, desperately wanted, the Dream Kitchen, which had a dishwasher, a magical appliance that I dreamed of one day being able to buy my poor, overworked mother. And most memorably, the Temple Market, where I had to empty my pockets to prove that I wasn't a crook like my father. That place traumatized me. It did, but nevertheless, I was overjoyed to see that it had reopened a few years ago. Go figure, I was happy. And it's not even under new management, It's run by the son of the original owner. He reached out to me, and we're now Facebook friends. He sends me photos of their elaborate holiday displays. He even had a copy of Cuckoo Land on the counter when I went in there. Wow, I could not have written that happy ending for that chapter of my life. But unfortunately, there was one group of people I never did hear from when the book came out, still have not heard from to this day. My local Greek relatives. They clearly were unhappy that I had written this book. Can't say I was surprised. A lot of what I heard from that side of my family growing up, my father, Jimmy's side, was keep it in the family. Or as Jimmy would put it more menacingly, keep it on a stone wall, Dummkopf, if you know what's good for you. In other words, if anyone asks you about this family, stonewall them. Don't be a snitch. It's like the Greek mafia. But writers, we are snitches. That's what we do. We tell the stories of our lives. We sing for our supper. We strive to speak the truth to power. In doing so, you have to be willing to alienate some people, to make some enemies. That's practically part of the job description. Even if it's people that you care about, friends or family. And apparently I did succeed in that regard. I keep wondering when I come back here, when I speak publicly like this, if one time I'll look out into the audience and see one of those relatives. But it just has not happened, and I'm not holding my breath. But I couldn't hold my tongue. I couldn't silence my voice. And in answer to Jimmy, I knew what was good for me, and it was telling the truth. Really, there are just too many lies out there, especially these days. I think we're drowning in a sea of lies. Who needs any more? Not from me. I don't need them. And as I think I made clear, there has always been way, way more support than hostility from people here in my home state. Way more that I've gained than lost in writing this book. I've made so many incredible new friends in this city, people that feel like my family, even more so now that my immediate family is all gone. People like Susan and Ted Foster, and Susan and Peter Duffy, sitting in the front row who I came with. They've welcomed me into their homes, making me oatmeal and pumpkin pancakes in the morning. And then there's Selma and her brilliant, big-hearted husband, Paul. And literally dozens of other people, way too many to name. But I'd be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to one other person, a hero of mine, your extraordinary newly re-elected mayor, Joyce Craig. Before she was mayor, Joyce reached out to me and asked if I'd be interested in returning to Elmwood Gardens to speak. I said yes, and it was a remarkable experience going back there. The countries where people immigrated from had changed over the decades. When I was there were a lot of Greeks like my father, and Irish, French Canadians, and now there are people from places like Somalia and Kenya. But it's the same deal, the same trajectory, you know? People from other places coming here to better their lives, hoping to be welcomed into the arms of this city, as so many generations have been. And I went back there to Elmwood again yesterday for another wonderful talk. And who shows up again but Joyce? You know, she's mayor, she takes the time out of her day. I just was really pleased. It was clear to me from that first time I went to Elmwood that Joyce really, really cared about the people living where I grew up, in the South End, in public housing. Joyce Craig, she seems to have boundless empathy for the people in this city. In my opinion, that's the most important quality that a public servant can have. Joyce's election and re-election give me hope in these dark times. And I talk about her in other speeches I give in other states and everything. Everybody's always, you know, happy to hear about her because she's an honest-to-God trailblazer, the first woman mayor in this city's 170-year-plus history. You folks are lucky to have her. So yesterday was this busy day for me. In addition to going to Elmwood, I also went back to high school. I spent a great day there talking to lots of the students, bright, engaged young people. As Selma, who orchestrated this visit, exclaimed afterwards, They didn't even pick up their phones. It was quite remarkable. Those of you who are parents probably really know that. And the kids, it was very clear that they were from many different backgrounds. And yet they are all studying together. One high school, one student body. So inspiring. But that actually wasn't the first time that I returned to Central. Prior to yesterday, about 2 years ago, I went back there for the very first time since I graduated. Selma invited me to speak at the Honor Society induction ceremony. Now, I had been in the Honor Society in my junior and senior years, so it kind of made sense that she invited me back. But really, it was amazing I ever got accepted into that organization in the first place, that I did well enough academically to get in there, because I had no academic role models whatsoever. Neither of my parents graduated from high school. My mother never even made it past grade school. And my sister, she just plain hated high school. But you know, she went to Memorial, so maybe that had something to do with it. Just kidding. I'm sure it's a great school. It's just not my school. But never mind those divisions. Just for tonight, in the spirit of this wonderful evening, let's pretend we are one Manchester, one high school. So like I said, I did do well in high school, graduated 4th in my class, and was voted most intellectual, which was a whole other category than the smartest. I definitely was not the smartest. I won the intellectual moniker, I think, because I intended to spar with a lot of my teachers about the political issues of the day. I was a political junkie even back then. I had been sneaking downtown since the age of 14 to volunteer at various political campaign headquarters, licking envelopes until my tongue was riddled with paper cuts. And my father, actually, he encouraged me to talk back to my teachers. He said most teachers were just know-it-alls, so you ought to give them a little lip. This was, after all, the man who threatened to kneecap my teacher when I was in the 3rd grade. He also told me not to work so damn hard, to go break a few windows, take a few courses I could coast with, and oh yeah, play hooky, just like he had done it in high school. Fortunately, by that point, I didn't always listen to him, didn't always follow his stellar example. If I had, I might be in Concord right now, not Manchester, in the brand new women's prison. That prison, by the way, that Susan Hughes, my childhood idol from Cuckoo Land, sued the state to build more than 30 years ago. That prison finally opened after multiple delays, many more lawsuits. Meanwhile, hundreds of women over the years got housed in pretty dreadful conditions in that building in Goffstown that was meant to be just temporary for them. Like I said, the wheels of change can turn a little slowly here. But still, that lag time was awful and unjust. That said, I am glad it's finally been built, and I know Susan would be too. It's an important part of her legacy, an important part of why I wanted to write this book. You could say that that chapter had a happy ending too. It just took a lot longer to be written. And interestingly, I digressed from talking about high school to talking about prison. I'm sure there's a deep-seated explanation for that. It's definitely not a coincidence, because I was just about to say how incredibly difficult it was for me to return to high school that first time I went back there I don't think you really realize that, Selma, how hard that was. How much I had walled off those particular years of my life. Because while I had been back to Manchester numerous times over the years to visit my parents as they were aging, or when I was researching this book, or no surprise, when my father finally landed in jail, I'd never been back to high school. No reunions, no contact with that school whatsoever. I had pretty much decided I would never go back. I just didn't want to. It's not something I thought through or really analyzed. I just did not want to go. I told myself there was no real reason to go. I hadn't stayed in touch with anyone I went to high school with. I had no connections with anybody. But obviously, that was not the real reason for my resistance. As I think for a lot of people, my high school years were not my happiest. The truth is, I never went to a football game, a school play, or a science fair. I never went to my prom, junior or senior. I never even went to the Puritan back then, even though I really, really wanted to. I used to fantasize about hanging out there with friends on a warm summer night, eating a hot fudge sundae. But my father said that place was a clip joint for North Enders, and we were South Enders, and that felt like a world apart. When I saw those movies and TV shows of my youth with high school girls like Gidget and Patty Duke, those girls seemed like Martians to me, silly and zany and carefree. Those things were not in my emotional universe. The fact is, I was a very depressed girl during those years, and sometimes I even felt suicidal. Not that my grade school years were any happy-go-lucky picnic either, as many of you know from reading Cuckoo Land. But high school was a particularly dark time. More than once, I showed up for class with my eyes red and puffy from crying, which I tried to hide with acne cover-up my sister had shoplifted from Zayre's department store. My hair literally began to fall out in clumps. I was taken to a hair loss specialist at Mary Hitchcock Hospital in Hanover. And at one point, like my father, who was recovering from ulcer surgery, I began to follow a restrictive ulcer diet because my stomach was killing me all the time, and I was convinced that I had an ulcer too. My best friend Ellen, who was perpetually on a weight loss diet, thought my diet of ice cream, mashed potatoes, and Campbell's cream of mushroom soup was infinitely more delectable. But trust me, it wasn't. Some of these details I'm giving you, I guess you could call them the Cuckoo Land outtakes, the traumatic stuff that didn't make it into the book. If I put all the drama and trauma in there, this book would have been 1,000 pages long, and no publisher would ever have published it. It wasn't as if no one noticed that I was going bald and had pimple medicine around my eyes. Occasionally, someone at school would notice I didn't look so hot. A woman in the principal's office or a fellow student would ask with a concerned look if I was okay. But I always faked a smile and said I was totally fine, or that I was getting over a cold, or I didn't have enough sleep the night before I was studying for a big test. I confided in no one about how bad I felt, how bad things were at home. I experienced a deep, deep sense of isolation. I was imprisoned in my misery. Of course, high school's a challenging time no matter what. Those years are a psychological and hormonal minefield for everyone. But in my case, the difficulty of those years was compounded exponentially because my home life was so chaotic, so unbelievably stressful, and truly dangerous. And that, as all of my readers know, was primarily because of my father, Jimmy, a troubled guy who was an alcoholic, dangerously mentally ill, and violent, extremely violent. Really, he just seemed to thrive on violence. Some of you around my age probably remember that slogan from the 60s, "Make love, not war." It's an anti-Vietnam War slogan for you non-boomers out there. That slogan was like the antithesis of Jimmy's worldview. His view was, make war, not love, because life to him was just a cradle-to-grave battleground. It was not about oneness or building community or fostering understanding and empathy, which of course is everything that's being valued and celebrated with this One Book initiative. He mocked all of that oneness as kumbaya, phony baloney, pie in the sky, utopia, a word he laughed at and disdained. Jimmy's take on things was, it's a dog-eat-dog world. Every man for himself, forget no man is an island. Every man is an island. Every man is an island fighting to defend his isolated, walled-off little plot of existence. And P.S., there was no Santa on that island. That's what he told me when I was still young enough to believe in Santa. So this was the philosophy that Jimmy tried mightily to indoctrinate me into, really from the time I was born. There's a moment in Cuckoo Land when I'm riding in the car with him when I'm 9, where he really lays out this philosophy, and I'm going to read that to you in a moment, but I want to give it some context. Jimmy's diatribe was a reaction to Martin Luther King delivering his landmark "I Have a Dream" speech the day before in Washington on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. August 28, 1963, a day that just happened to coincide with Jimmy's 35th birthday. A day that angered and depressed him no end because he feared the best years of his life were over, and the future, as he saw it, his future, was looking bleak. Things were changing in the country, and he didn't like it. Didn't like it one bit. He was a big fan of Alabama Governor George Wallace, who had delivered a famous speech of his own just a few months before Dr. King's, in which he declared, "Segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever." That vile speech captured Jimmy's dark, isolationist mindset perfectly. King's speech, on the other hand, was about optimism and unity, racial unity, geographic unity, a unity of past and future. Our shameful past was acknowledged, but a hopeful future was imagined in soaring, melodic terms. King's speech was televised widely across America, including in our little living room in our Elmwood Gardens apartment, at least until Jimmy made me turn it off, using a racial slur we all know now as the N-word. A word that even back then made my ears burn red. And if Jimmy were here today, he'd still use that word, and he had other slurs for other groups of people. But of course, he would tell you he wasn't a racist. He'd insist he wasn't. But let me tell you, he was. Of course he was. You know when someone is a racist. You know because they make your ears burn. It's as simple as that. So Jimmy, he may have made me change that channel that day, but he couldn't block out what I had already heard and seen. 250,000 people coming together, black and white, young and old, listening to what is to this day one of the greatest speeches ever delivered. Go online and watch that whole thing when you're feeling like your future is looking bleak. And I promise it will give you a shot in the arm. It will give you a kick in the pants to get up and do something. It will give you a belief that unity is possible. One people, one America. Imagine that. Just like John Lennon and Yoko Ono said, they were dreamers. King was a dreamer. We all need to be dreamers right now. Wide awake dreamers. So the next day, after the beautiful King's speech, I was out with Jimmy, driving around Manchester as we often were, from the gun shop to the book he joined to the beer parlor, and he could not stop ranting about that speech, bad-mouthing all those so-called bleeding hearts, as he called them, that were there cheering on Dr. King. And here is what he said, recounted in Cuckoo Land. "What's a bleeding heart?" I asked Jimmy. He swerved around the slow car, and I had to wait for his answer. "A bleeding heart is a do-gooder," he finally said. "A person who wants the whole damn world to get along, even though since time began, people in different tribes have been clobbering one another." "Why?" I asked. "Why are people always clobbering one another?" "Because we're animals," he said. "Wild animals. Animals fight each other. That's nature. You put a tiger in a pen with Bambi, the tiger's gonna have Bambi for breakfast. The tiger and Bambi ain't gonna have a goddamn Sunday picnic. If you're stronger, you dominate. The bleeding hearts want a perfect world where everybody gets along. If I'm a tiger, they want to pass laws telling me I have to picnic with Bambi. They want to make the strong animal weak so the weak animal doesn't get a goddamn inferiority complex. They want me to share my jungle with Bambi. Well, it ain't gonna happen. Bambi better move out of my jungle and into the woods where he belongs, so he has a shot to live out his life, far, far away from me." It's pretty depressing, right? No wonder I was depressed. Imagine hearing that kind of talk day in, day out. And on the off chance somebody doesn't remember who Bambi was, Bambi was a sweet young deer in a Disney movie who loved his non-deer friends, a rabbit and a skunk, and who loved his mother. In fact, the poster's logline when it came out called it, quote, "a great love story." So what heartless meanie wouldn't love Bambi? Well, Jimmy Norris, obviously. And actually, hunters, they didn't like Bambi either. They hated it. You know, they thought the movie made them look bad. And of course, Jimmy was a hunter, you know, so that might have factored into his anti-Bambi fervor. But mostly, I think it was a philosophical beef he had with the movie. For Jimmy, my earliest, most fanatical, most influential teacher, life was pure and simple a hierarchy of weak and strong and never-ending battles to solidify one's place in that hierarchy. And though Jimmy had a very erratic Jekyll and Hyde kind of personality because of all the alcohol and, you know, the mental illness he had, on this perspective on life, he never ever wavered. In fact, right before he died, just a couple of weeks before, he got it into his head to make a list of all the wars he could think of, all the battles, big and small, that there had been throughout history. And, you know, wow, he was a prodigious reader, and he knew a ton about history. So it was a depressingly long list. That list, which he eagerly shared with me, still trying to indoctrinate me, you know, to win me over to his side, the dark side in Star Wars lingo. That list embodied his Tiger and Bambi worldview. It proved he was right. Make war, not love. Man's true nature, a warmonger. Well, I questioned that philosophy that day in the car. I rejected it when he showed me that depressing list, and I denounce it today. Even with everything going on in the world, all the divisions in the country and in the world, all the hatred. You know, when I wrote Cuckoo Land, I set out to shine a light on the past attitudes and prejudices and aggressions that I had lived through. Little did I know we'd be seeing a resurgence of segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. I didn't know that we'd be seeing the past repeating itself. Like a horror movie sequel, it is to me. It's disheartening for many of us. It makes my bleeding heart bleed. But we cannot give up, and it starts on the community level like this. It starts person to person, helping one another, doing good deeds for one another, even for a little girl from Elmwood Gardens. People in this community have helped me in so many ways, big and small. Let me just tell you one amazing story about how a Manchester do-gooder helped me, how he helped me drown my father. My friend Ted Foster, sitting right there, who I mentioned earlier. Many of you know Ted is a master golfer, Manchester's golf Yoda. He has taught generations of kids in this city the mystical game of golf. Now, Ted, when he was young, he knew my father, Jimmy, because Jimmy used to go into Ted's father's sports shop. That was many, many years ago. Ted had not seen Jimmy in a long time. So when Jimmy finally died in 2004, per his instructions, I was supposed to scatter his ashes at sea. You know, he was a big fisherman and he loved the sea. The only problem was he wanted my mother Shirley's ashes to be scattered with him, and Shirley was still very much alive. Of course, he didn't bother asking Shirley what arrangements she might want when she passed away. You know, he'd controlled her in life. Why should it be any different in death? After he was gone, Shirley was finally able to make her own decisions. She thought it through and said, "You know what? I think I'd rather go to California when I'm dead." Just like me, she wanted to escape to Cuckoo Land. She had had enough of Jimmy, you know, more than enough. But she didn't want to ignore his wishes either. You know, she's a nice person. She kind of wanted to do something. So she came up with this compromise. "Give him a quarter of me," she said, "and you take the rest." So that was the plan. 3/4 of Shirley would happily come out to Cuckoo Land, and a reluctant quarter would head out to sea with Jimmy. Now, fortunately, Shirley lived for several more years, but after she did pass away in 2012, I had to make arrangements to do this burial at sea. An illicit, and I guess technically illegal endeavor, but since it involves Jimmy, that's par for the course. So Jimmy had designated one of his Greek relatives to help out with this because they had a boat. But when the time came, the Greek relatives said they were too busy. They couldn't do it. Fortunately, a year or so before, I had mentioned to Ted about Jimmy's wishes, and he had offered to take me out in his boat. I thanked him at the time, but told him I had it covered. But now that I had been left high and dry, I called up Ted. Without a hint of hesitation, he said, absolutely, he would do it, no problem. What I didn't know at the time was that in the interim, Ted had actually sold his boat. He had no boat. But he didn't tell me that. Instead, he promptly went on Craigslist and he bought a boat. He did. He bought a boat. Who in the world does such a thing as that? Only a mensch, a Manchester mensch. And for those of you who don't know your Yiddish, that means a salt of the earth person, a wonderful person. That is Ted. Unfortunately, though, this boat that he ended up buying, sight unseen, I think, was, to put it mildly, it was less than seaworthy. Apparently, it had big holes in the bottom that he had to patch up. His wife, Susan, said she wouldn't be caught dead in that boat because she'd probably be caught dead. We probably never should have gone out, Ted, in that boat. But, you know, we had made this plan. James and I, my husband, had come in from California, and it was a Sunday. We all planned it out. So off we went, the four of us, Ted, his son Teddy, my husband James, and myself, out to sea on the worst, choppiest day of the entire year, maybe of the decade. Even Ted, who knows his boats, is like, I remember he said to me at one point, we're really on the edge here. You know, it was scary. And we're heading out to the Isle of Shoals, one of Jimmy's favorite fishing spots. Boy, and it was bad, bad, bad out there. You know, the boat was tossing around like a toy. It looked, I mean, it was, and it's a long ways out there. You guys been out to the Isle of Shoals? It's, you know, not like a short jaunt. And so we keep going and going. It's been a long time since I'd been out there. I didn't really remember how far it was. And finally, you know, you can't even see land out there, and there's no other boats around. Finally, I just, you know, said enough. Enough, I'm not going any further, Jimmy. It was like, enough already, you know. Too bad, this is crazy. It's a crazy Jimmy thing to do. So I said to Ted, you know, cut the motor, we're done here. And Ted said, you know, that's probably a good idea because I'm not really sure we have enough fuel to get all the way back. So he cut the motor, and then I scattered the ashes, and I remember Ted said, gee, I just gotta put him out there. And he said, I thought you'd be crying or something. I'm like, nope, I'm not crying. I'm like, bye. It really, of course, you know what happened. You know, we're bouncing around there, and you know, it's kind of, you know, when you stop the motor, you know, you get more nauseous when you're not moving in a boat anyway. So Ted goes to start the motor up again, and of course, you can fill that in. What happens? Doesn't start. We're stuck out there. The motor is dead as a doornail. And by then, it's starting to feel very eerie, like Jimmy is out there with us, like some supernatural maniac in those scary movies he took me to as a kid. He's finally gonna kill me. But if it was Jimmy's spirit, he did not succeed in taking me down, because I had good guy Ted on my side. And he finally got that damn motor running. Don't know how he did it, tinkered in there, but he's a nautical Yoda, along with a golf Yoda. Yoda Ted helped me lay Jimmy to rest, helped me finally win that battle. And so, you know, Jimmy could have added that battle to his long, long list. He and I were engaged in a lifelong battle. Because the fact is, most wars we encounter don't involve armies or even grand ideologies. The conflicts we face most often are the everyday ones, interpersonal ones, in our communities and in our homes. How do we treat our neighbors? How do we treat people we encounter in restaurants or on the road while we're in a traffic jam? Let them in, shut them out. How do we treat our friends and family, the people we say we love? Another war Jimmy should have added to his awful list was Jimmy's family war. I was a casualty in Jimmy's family war. So was my mother Shirley and my half-sister Virginia. We were all Bambis to him. All women were Bambis to him. And let's face it, that's how women have been positioned in society for millennia. The weaker sex, we're called, right? Jimmy used that term a lot, but he sure as hell didn't invent it. Society gave him that power, and he seized it with a vengeance. He dominated us mercilessly, but he also tried to pit us against one another to create a family war zone. He loved to stir up family conflict, to force people to take sides against each other, to shift allegiances. It entertained him trying to turn our household into the Roman Colosseum. I have to say, though, he was not that successful at it. Women in jeopardy know that they have to stick together. Really, all women know that. Lacking individual power, we know there's strength in numbers. Look at the Women's March. Look at the young climate activist Greta Thunberg and the legions of young women across the globe she's inspiring. And older women she's inspiring too, like Jane Fonda. Right? You've seen that? 82, she's out there getting herself arrested again, to protest inaction against the climate crisis, which is truly the most dire crisis that we face, in my opinion. Stronger Together is not just a political slogan for these young women, it's a survival mechanism. They know it's the only way we have a prayer of surviving. And, by the way, regardless of your political persuasion, I never understood what was wrong, with that slogan. Hillary Clinton's campaign slogan was Stronger Together. I don't know if you remember that. It seems like a million years ago, but people did make fun of it. They said it was weak. Stronger Together is weak. Unity is wishy-washy. I'm sorry, but not in my book. Pun intended. And it's why we're here, for Christ's sakes. Why any community wants to have a one-book initiative in the first place, to bring people together, to make the community stronger through books. Because books, we know it, they're powerful things. Books have been burned for a reason. Words can be twice as powerful as bullets. Tyrants know that. People attacking and murdering journalists know that. That old childhood saying, sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me, that was baloney. Even back then, the kids who said it didn't really believe it. They said it because they were wounded. Their ears were burning like mine were when I heard Jimmy say the N-word. Words hurt, and words can heal. They can be poison, or they can be medicine. I wanted my book to be medicine. I wanted it to do some healing for myself and for others. I spent 2 years at my desk agonizing over finding the absolute right words to say. Words that I hoped would move people, create a bridge between my past and their present, that would make people identify with the experiences of a poor little nobody girl from Manchester, New Hampshire. And I have to say, in that I have succeeded. People embraced that little girl, people old and young, men and women, black and white, even kind of miraculously, people from different political persuasions. That was one book, one big surprise. And that word one, that simple little 3-letter word, is really pretty complicated. It can signify two opposing things, one as in all alone, and one as in many brought together. The purpose of this One City, One Book is obviously the latter, and you've done that over the past month with all these wonderful events so many people have participated in. I want to thank this entire extraordinary community for accompanying me on my journey to Cuckoo Land. I wish I could take every one of you back there with me, but I definitely will take you and all this whole beautiful week back in my heart. Thank you so, so much, my family of origin, my Manchester family. Thank you. I wasn't really expecting that, but boy, that is from the heart. I do feel that, you guys. I cannot believe what this week has been, and all of your kindness and your support just has meant the world to me. I never expected this. I never imagined that it would have happened, and I just can't believe it. I just still can't believe it. So, some tears, but happy tears, not Jimmy tears.
I'm from Manchester. I've grown up here my whole life. And in the 60s, I was a good friend of Susan when she was cancer and she became fused.
Yeah.
Together at Sacred Heart Hospital when I was in high school and in college. And when I see you today, I see the Susan who would have thrived, who would have been proud of you. And I just wanted to say that because when I read your book and I relived everything that Susan went through and then through some other things that she had gone through, I cried. And I couldn't believe and picture, unfortunately, how much she looked like her father. It was really disgusting because he's not a very good man. So she would be very proud of you today and the woman you have become, and she would have been happy to be your role model. And she was a really good role model when she was younger, and the hell that she went through caused her to, die early. So I just wanted to tell you that.
Oh, thank you so much. I do feel I stand here for both of us, definitely. She's my soul sister.
Good evening. I actually grew up very close to Elm Project on the other side of Kilburn Road. As a young kid, I frequented Temple Flea Market. And I know exactly about the stories, what really resonated with me growing up. I'm actually a couple of years younger than you were, so the whole book kind of was big, like a lot of things you shared were also a big part of my childhood. And there's a few stories off the record that probably shouldn't mention in the Bible.
Oh, come on. I laid it all out there. You gotta go for it. No.
All the players have passed on, but I have crossed paths with, I may have crossed paths with Jimmy, I may have crossed paths with you at some point, so, it really resonated with me growing up in Manchester, so, excellent job.
Thank you. You know, I do feel like I've crossed paths with like every single person in this city. And it's a total 6 degrees of separation, this town, isn't it? Don't you feel that? I mean, it's like 15,000 people, but it seems like everybody knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. And, you know, in coming from, like I said, you know, a state where there's 40 million people, and I don't know my next door neighbors, this is just, it's a different world, a beautiful world. What you've got going here is something really special. You know, it's a big enough community. You think, okay, you know, connection if you're a little town or something. Yeah, everybody knows everybody. But this is a pretty big city, and yet everybody, there's some connection here. So,
That was a big operation. Leah Mom used to work.
yes, what about Foster Grant?
I remember the factory.
You remember it, yes. It was,
The factory, and they did make sunglasses there.
yeah.
And we used to, in the summertime, we had nothing to do, so we'd ride our bikes down to the slaughterhouse and, you know, watch them kill the cows. You know.
Oh boy, that would have been a good little detail in Cuckoo Land. I'm sure I would have put that in if I had remembered that one. I do, now that you say it, yes.
And my father calling up the bookie every day, playing the end pool. So I remember that.
There seemed to be an awful lot of bookies in this city at that time. I mean, there were a couple of them. Susan had a little get-together for me last night, and there's like every person was like, oh yeah, my father was a bookie, my father was a bookie. I'm like, whoa, there was a lot of gambling in this, you know. No, see, it's 6 degrees. Everybody knows a bookie here. Really? Okay. Well, I'm sure my father bet with him then, because any bookie that was around, he bet with.
I'll talk to you about that later.
Okie doke. Do that.
Hi, Gloria.
Hi.
So nice to meet you.
Thanks.
My niece, as we speak, is growing up in the same place that you did on her street. And like you mentioned, multicultural things have changed, but things have still stayed the same. I'm trying to get my sister to move to Kelly Falls, where my son has recently grown up. I just raised an 18-year-old, and it was rough leaving him the place, and I booked it to Vermont. I live in Montpelier now, but the excerpt of your book that you talk about doing college up in Vermont, and how you never really quite connected, I can totally understand that. Even though I'm a hippie, I still have this connection to Manchester, and I know Mr. Burkish behind me, and we have such a community here, and your book just, you brought it all together. And I believe my dad and your dad probably crossed paths and talked about the boogie joint. My dad would talk about the creeps downtown and like, you know, just throwing around like what would be considered slurs today. Like back then it was just like a matter of speech. And my dad was in the Manchester Fire Department for 20 years. Always took pride in that. He's in Florida now. But your book growing up and what you just said earlier about being in high school and like not doing the prom and not being able to do certain things and missing out, you didn't miss out. You took that experience, you took it to heart, and you wrote a book. And I love your book. I love you. Just the way you're so candid and your honesty. Even though you moved out the cuckoo land, but you still got this. That is better than anything. And like you've given me inspiration to write my own book. And
Fantastic. Good. You should. You've got a you know, gift for language. I can see that right here. So do it, girl. Do it.
I will. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your book. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks.
When are you going to write another one?
Yes, I am. I'm working on a novel, but it's got a lot of autobiographical elements in it. So, you know, that will be, you know, the next chapter. Well, you know, you never know. You never ask a writer that. We never darn know how long, you know. But hopefully, you know, I feel energized from this trip. I can't wait to get back to my desk, and I think that being back here, has really been great for me creatively. So even though, I do feel a little bit, oh no, I haven't been doing my writing since I've been here so much, which is not usual for me. I try to be very disciplined. You have to be if you're a writer. But there was a purpose, a good purpose creatively to this, and I expect things will move quickly from here. And I'm hoping to turn Cuckoo Land into a limited TV series. I've been working on adapting it for a bit, and it's been hard, actually, difficult, because you have to kind of rethink the whole thing as if it's not your life. I could have done it if this was somebody else's book a whole lot easier, but you have to combine characters, you have to change the time frame. Everything that's based on a true thing is, partially true. You have to dramatize things. And when it's your own life, you kind of don't want to change things, because it's the truth. But anyway, so that's been my stumbling block there, but I've gotten over that. Now I have a freedom that I feel like I've got detachment. I can do what I want with it, and, but I'm not going to combine me and Susan into one character. I can just announce that right here. We won't be one.
Yes, you are left, Gloria.
Thank you.
Having dealt with such abuse yourself, what is your feeling when Woody Allen stuff broke? Obviously, you worked with him.
Yes, very difficult for me. That's a very difficult subject, because I did work with Woody for quite a long time, and actually that was a drop in the bucket of the amount of time that he was in my life, which was a very, very long time. And he was responsible for getting me my first job, and I spent a lot of time around him with his children, and it's a heartbreaking situation. I feel terrible about it, and I used to see him every time I went to New York or whatever, and I don't do it anymore. I don't feel good about it. So it's not a happy thing. How could it be? Yeah. Oh, any other questions or thoughts? Hi.
I just wanted to say, first of all, I didn't grow up in Manchester.
Did not, did you say?
I've been here for 23 years, and I had to take a ride around Helen Gardens.
Yeah.
I had to take a ride around Helen Gardens just to see where this all took place. But I want to say right from the very beginning, I get a little emotional. You had a quote from P.S.
Hold the microphone just a little. That's okay.
From P.S. Sloan, and that grabbed me. The stones may pass, the flood's bigger than water, and the sins of fall on the daughter.
Yes.
Spoke for many of us about the lives we had as children, about what it was like to grow up in less than Brady Bunch world.
Yeah.
I just want to thank you. And my question was going to be, is this going to be a movie? I'm so glad it's going to be a TV show.
I hope so. I hope so. I really think it would be, reach even more people. Although I do want to tell you that there are people. It's not just a New Hampshire story. Touching people here. I've gotten, calls and emails and things from people all over, and they get it. These things are sadly universal, and so you didn't have to grow up here to have your own personal cuckoo land. Thank you, though, for that.
I do. Well, I can say this, as one of the sons of a father that owns a market. I guess my bias reading the book was, when everyone was reading to me, I'm saying, okay, well, where's the part about the store? And now that the part worth making it some kind of TV and movie production, my father was quite a willing man to say, if he could be portrayed by George Clooney.
Okay, well, we'll take that under advisement. But who would play Hetty? You didn't, do you remember her?
I say I was young enough not really to remember her. I don't remember Esther, who worked there afterwards. She worked there for a long time. I had some older siblings who kind of remember her. I guess there's only another bias thing because since they worked for my father, they really never saw anything bad about them.
Well, I'm glad that store was there. There was no other place for us to shop, really. It was the store for Elmwood Gardens. I mean, that was close enough. Many of the people there did not have cars. That was the other thing. You know, they just, they needed a place that was close by. And without you, I wouldn't have had the dream kitchen. Yes.
Thank you very much. My name is Eric. I'm with the Manchester Library Thursday Night Book Club, and we have some members here and over there. And Steve Vigiano, who couldn't make it because he's working. Thanks a lot, boss. He had a couple questions that he wanted the book covers to ask you.
Great.
And I have a question of my own. He wanted to know, where was the drive-in movie?
Everybody wants that, you know, they love that. Litchfield.
Where was it?
Litchfield. Yeah, they played the dirty movies there. Of course, that's where he would take me.
And he also wanted to know where the bookie joint was.
You know, the bookie joint was in the, you know, in the Greek section. That was, I can't remember the exact block, but, you know, it was in the Greek section. Everything was in that section.
And then finally, he asked, why did she refer to her first serious boyfriend as Boog Boy? And was she trying to protect his identity? Was it a deliberate effort to reduce him to a one-dimensional, insignificant character?
Whoa, Mook Boy! You know.
Very thorough.
You know, I was protecting his identity a little bit because it just seemed like the right thing to do with him. I did that in a couple of instances. But I know that, you know, he's read the book and he seems fine with it. And so, but I don't think you think he's one-dimensional? I guess, you know, okay. You know, he's a first boyfriend. He's the first guy I slept with, so maybe, you know, I don't know. I'll look at that. Maybe I could have made him a little, you know, more full of a character. I'm open to criticism. Bring it on.
And then my question for you was, one thing that I thought was left out of the book that I was really glued to and I wanted to find out more was your sister Virginia's biological mother.
Mm.
And because I felt so much for your mom, surely I thought she was a saint for putting up with everything. And,
Yeah.
I mean, the whole thing about her ornaments being taken was kind of fresh to me. That was really sad. But
Yes.
I really wanted to know about Virginia's mom because it seemed like she was railroaded
Yes.
to give up custody.
Yes.
So do you know, or can you share anything as to what happened with her mom?
Yes, you know, like I said at the beginning of how so many people have, you know, come to me that would never have come into my life. So, you know, my sister had a half-sister that to me, you know, I've never met. I still haven't met her because she lives here in, I don't know, Massachusetts. But she reached out to me again on, you know, through my website and we started corresponding, and she told me some stories about Virginia's mother. Virginia never saw her mother, ever. And she had been told, your mother didn't want you. And it was absolutely not the case. This half-sister said every single year on my sister's birthday, she would get into bed and weep. And when she saw an announcement in the paper that my sister had gotten married the first time, she was just heartbroken. But, you know, they applied a lot of pressure, the Greek relatives, and they were all, again, like a Greek mafia about it. They closed ranks, and my yaya turned, you know, she came to the door. My yaya said, "Don't you ever come back here again." And, you know, he made up a lot of lies from what I then found out about her, you know, to get custody. Very rare. I mean, at that time, for the man to get custody of the little girl, he had to portray her as a really terrible woman. And I don't know, you know, maybe she had some flaws, but do we think that she could have been worse than Jimmy? I don't. So, I mean, I think she drank like he did, but I don't think she was as bad as alcoholic as he was. You know, he had 1 million DWIs. I've not heard that about her. So, yeah, you know, it's a very sad thing. She never got to see her mother, and she did die kind of young. Thank you. Ah. Oh. Can you hold the mic just a little?
Sorry. Ask about how you found, when you found the strength in the agency to take your life and tell the story, especially Kevin's book about the alienation that you received from your family. Having written it, just when you found the strength to do that and decided that it didn't matter what your family thought, just that you needed to tell your story.
Right. Well, I think that, you know, I just went through a lot of therapy, you know, over the years, and I felt that it was the right thing. I thought if the book got published, it would, on balance, it would help some people maybe, and so I felt that my impulse was true. I felt that you know, I knew I was doing it. And so I used that as my guiding light. And, you know, it obviously my parents were getting older and all of that. You know, maybe if I had been a little younger and they were younger, it might have been harder. But they knew I was working on this book for quite a long time. And they were both very behind it. And, you know, so I had that, in a way, an advantage. I don't know if you saw at the end of the book, the acknowledgement from my father. Did you see that? He said, "Crucify me if you have to get the goddamn story right." So, you know, I wish he could have read it to know, you know, what he would think. I do and I don't, you know. I don't know where that would have gone, but, you know, you just have to, no, if you're grappling with that yourself as a writer, I just think you have to put it aside. You've got to just be, you know, true to yourself and your you know, your work, and trust that. Yeah. Hi. I can.
I speak to you as a neighbor. We grew up on the same street.
On Ahern? Which number?
122.
Oh, 122, 47.
Reading your book, what amazed me was that I found myself laughing.
Yeah.
Because even though it's horrible, but your sense of black humor is so spot on, and your idioms and your sense of ear was perfect. So I want to thank you.
Thank you. That means a lot.
You make your series that you retain that.
Yes, absolutely. It
Because
needs it.
The rest of it is palatable because you have that dark sense of humor.
Yes. That is my truth. I mean, it isn't just sort of layered on there. That's how, you know, that's how I experienced it, and that's how it is. You know, there's great irony all over the world, all over our lives, you know, and it's a lot of black irony in the language and in the situations. That's how I experienced it. That's how I wrote it. But thank you. I'm glad you laughed. I laughed too. Sometimes when I was writing it, you wonder, writers, are they, but I literally burst out laughing, as you're flowing and it's coming out and you're writing it. It's just some things. And there were, like you say, some of the more horrific things, but remembering what was said, the absurdity of it made me laugh out loud. It's a good sign if you can laugh at your own work, make yourself laugh when you're writing.
Anyone else? Okay, then I guess we're going to give Gloria a minute or two to set herself up for signing all of her books. And cue up nice and neat, okay? Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody.